the physical emphasis of this yin yoga practice will be the upper body and the shoulders. There'll also be some hip openers and some spine work too. The postures include caterpillar, bow tie, saddle, melting heart, and we'll end with a yoga squat. So the topic will be comets. Some useful props to maybe gather up will be several blankets, some pillows, possibly a couch cushion if you have one, and or some books. So maybe gather up those props, cultivate your personal intention for practice, and then we'll start the sequence. So we'll start off the sequence with a little bit of breath work, a little bit of a couple of twists before we get started with the first yin posture. So find a comfortable seat, take some time to settle down, to root, to find your center and find your breath. So one of the points to yoga is to focus on the present moment, and we do that by noticing the sensations, our inner landscape here. And one of the sensations, one of the parts of our inner landscape that's most obvious to us is our breath. This is why we get so excited about the breath. So notice any little physical sensations, maybe mental and emotional sensations that are like predominating inside you. And that's actually happening in the present moment. So you're in touch with the present moment. Notice your inhales, exhales. Maybe grow your spine long, shoulders roll up and back. Maybe chin tuck slightly, just to create space so that breathing is easier. And then begin to lengthen your breath. If it's okay with your nose, you can seal your lips and just breathe through your nose here. Eyes are soft, face is soft. And just notice the present moment of your inhales and of your exhales. And we'll try a little bit of what I call just breath counting. So a 5 to 5 breath here. So after your next exhale, when you inhale to a slow cadence of 5. So at the beginning of the inhale, you start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then exhale to the same cadence of 5. So exhale, maybe count backwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then start the next inhale. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And maybe continue this cadence for a couple more breaths. If you're finding this strenuous or you're getting short of breath, drop the count. Go back to a normal natural breath for a while. Then maybe pick up the count again if you want to, or maybe just decide that this breathing exercise is not for you here. For those of you who want a little bit more challenge, then the idea is to increase the duration of the exhale, maybe as much as twice as the inhale. So instead of a 5 to 5 breath, try a 5 to 10 breath. In other words, on your next inhale, inhale to a slow cadence of 5. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then exhale to a slow cadence of 10, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can continue whatever type of this breathing technique that you're getting the most usefulness out of here for maybe 1 or 2 more rounds. Maybe it's just normal, natural breath here. When you do get done with your next exhale, then maybe do come back to a normal, natural breath. We'll start out with a few twists before the long held yin posture. So bring your hands on either side of your torso. On your next inhale, as you slowly inhale, make a big sweeping circle with your hands all the way up towards the ceiling, and reach up towards the ceiling, grow tall through your torso because this makes it easier to twist. And then slowly lower your arms, and as you do so, slowly twist over to your right side. So your right arm comes behind you. Your left hand maybe finds your left knee or left thigh if you're sitting in a cross-legged position. Grow up tall through your torso. On an inhale, see if you can gently deepen the twist ever so slightly on the exhale. Maybe one more breath here. So one more lengthening on the inhale, one more twisting on the exhale here. And then gently bring yourself forward. Do that all again. So next inhale, big giant sweeping circle up towards the ceiling, and then exhale very slowly, twist over to the left. And then 2 breaths here. So slow inhale to create length in the spine. Exhale, see if there's any more depth in the twist. One more breath here, and then gently bring yourself back to center, maybe a little bit of a counter twist. And then set yourself up for the first yin posture that we'll be holding for several minutes. This is called caterpillar pose, and it's a simple seated forward fold. So what you'll do is you'll start out just seated, legs out in front, and if you have a lot of tightness in your back body, in your legs and in your torso, then maybe sit up on a little bit of height like I'm doing here. Legs are extended out front, and then the idea here is we're just going to simply fold forward. Now if you try to fold forward and you don't go anywhere, let your knees be soft. In fact, maybe you need to pad your knees. I'm using a pillow here. Grow up tall through your torso for a moment, and then hinge forward from your hip sockets, however far you go. And you may not go very far, but once you're done hinging, then let the rest of your torso soften, let the muscles relax, and just let it round as far as you go. And maybe you don't go very far. So maybe you need some support. I happen to have a big old couch cushion here, so I could actually just throw that all the way underneath my torso to let it rest on. Some of us, we're fine with just hanging in midair here. Or maybe you want to get another blanket or a pillow to rest on. But this is the posture. The idea is you don't want it to be painful, but you do want to find your stopping point. So instead of worrying about what this looks like, you just go as far as you go and you stop. And we'll stay for a while. So some reminders of what we're doing in practice here. So what is a yin yoga practice? Well, the idea is we're primarily trying to create traction on connective tissue. You most effectively do that when you relax your muscle fiber and hold for a long time here. There's 3 basic principles to use in order to set that up. So the first principle is called finding your edge. And you basically move yourself into yoga posture. You go to a place where your body stops, and when you start to feel some traction, some sensation, some pressure here. So that's your edge, and your edge will be different than someone else's edge because your body is different and unique from everyone else's body. Maybe you have a high range of motion and your torso is kind of resting on your legs here. And if they're not feeling anything, well, you might look really cool, but you might not be getting anything out of the posture here. You might want to take your legs wide so your torso can keep going here. So the muscles in my legs are relaxed. I'm feeling a lot of traction in the backside of my legs. But my legs have actually rotated outward, which is actually fine here. So we're about halfway through. We'll try to stay here for another minute and a half here in caterpillar here. Trying to stay still and quiet. I'm not very still and quiet because I'm talking here. But if you're trying to practice along with me here in this video, then maybe you're finding your bit of stillness here. So that's the second principle. once you've found the shape that's appropriate for your body. Now you try to stay for a while here. And as you stay and be still, you can make little adjustments. Maybe arms are adjusted, maybe feet are adjusted, maybe the head and the neck need a prop after a while here. And then you're just coming back and noticing your breath. You're noticing this inner landscape, all the physical sensations that we typically don't notice because we're too active, we're too busy doing and too busy thinking. And so when we bring our attention to all of this, it can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes here. And if it's so overwhelming that you're experiencing pain or injury, that means you can just back off. You can also come out of the posture early here. I'm going to stay here for about another half a minute myself, but if you're done with this forward fold, please come out and take a rest for a while here. The third principle is time. And once you've tried to be in these postures, reside in these postures for several minutes, then you understand the time principle. It becomes very, very clear here. So in order for our connective tissue to actually kind of sense this traction that we're creating, it needs several minutes here, anywhere from a minute to say 5 minutes, even though we're going for about 3 or 4 in this yin yoga sequence here. So a couple more breaths here. And then when you're ready to come out of this posture, if you're still here, plant your hands, use the hands and your arms to slowly bring your torso all the way up. It might be really achy here, so take some time to engage the muscles in your core to really lengthen and neutralize the torso here. You can do some gentle twists here. You can do some other exercises. I'm going to suggest a little bit of core work here, which I call sunburn lengthening. So make your way onto hands and knees. And then nice tabletop position. So nice stable position with hands and with knees and with feet. You might have to rearrange things. Nice neutral spine here. And then enliven your core. Bring some awareness to your core. Extend your right leg long behind you. Bring it up parallel to your torso. Your heel's trying to press back towards the wall behind you. And then extend your left arm long and forward here. Again, belly is maybe activated to keep the back of the lumbar long here. And you just hold this for a breath or two. And then bring yourself back to your table pose. We'll do that on the other side. So first, feel nice and solid, and then extend the left leg out. Draw it up parallel to your torso. And then extend the right arm forward. And then lengthen out through the right arm, through the left leg. Core is active here. One more breath. And then go ahead and release back to table. And then from here, we'll set up for the next yin posture. The next yin posture is a pretty intense shoulder opener. It's called bow tie pose. So I'll give you some alternatives and I'll show you what you can do if it's just too intense. So first, bow tie pose without any props here. So what you will do is you'll come to lay on your belly. Maybe come into like a Sphinx type pose. And then you're going to kind of weave both of your arms underneath your torso. So what I'll do is I'll lift up my right arm and weave it underneath in between my left arm, and then take my left arm and weave it over to the other side. So I'm trying to lengthen out through both arms. And then I relax my torso, my head and my neck down. Maybe if I'm thinking about this, I have a pillow here that I can lay my head on here. So this is the pose. For many of us, this might be too intense here. So an option for this pose is to come to seated and just do eagle arms here. So find a comfortable seat. It can be sitting on your heels, but it can be even sitting in a chair. Go up tall through your torso. Arms come out wide and come into eagle arms. So sweep the right arm underneath the left, cross above the elbows, bend the elbows, bring the hands to the shoulders. Maybe weave the forearms together, maybe find the fingers, or maybe make prayer hands here. And then just stay here in eagle pose for as long as you can stand it, and then when you're tired of eagle pose, you can release it. So this is maybe a little bit more accessible. Maybe this is your version of eagle pose here. So you can try this. Or if you're close to bow tie pose, but it's still a little bit too intense, what you can do is put some height underneath your torso. So maybe I'm using 2 pillows here. You can use a couch cushion or a few blankets just to create a few inches of height underneath your torso. And then try this again. So right arm first, left arm on top. This is an asymmetric pose, so we have the other side of this to do after this one. So you don't want to get too carried away with this posture. Again, you could also have a 3rd pillow for your head and your neck if you're wanting your head and your neck to rest on something. Otherwise, we'll try about another minute or so to go here. And the idea is, in these physical postures, to actually notice the physical sensations that we're generating. Where is the traction, the pressure, the stress of this posture when you do this here? Is it in the back of the torso? Is it in the shoulder? Is it running down the arms? Is it in the head and the neck? Maybe it's in some other part of the body. I don't know, but if you're trying this pose, you do because you're feeling it right now. This is called getting in touch and noticing your inner landscape. This is called being still and quiet enough to notice these tractions and tensions that oftentimes we're not aware of because we're too busy doing something quick and active here. So this is our chance. This is our chance to notice. And as we notice, we stay focused in the present moment. So just as we can examine what's going on in the inner body, if we're still and quiet, we can also see subtle things happening around us in the external world, particularly out in space, in the sky. So the sky is very subtle, and in our busy social urban world, we often overlook the sky. In fact, we almost never pay any attention to it, and sometimes there's some very amazing sights to be seen if only we look up at the night sky, even the day sky here. So just one more breath here on this side. And then you need to come out of bow pose. This might be kind of hard. Slowly roll from side to side in bow pose until you can kind of release the arms here. If you're still doing eagle arms, you can just release the eagle arms. Make your way up to seated and do some shoulder rolling, gentle shoulder rolling, just to relieve the pressure of the arms here. So however you would like, roll one shoulder at a time, roll them both together, switch directions, and then set up for the other side of bow pose here. So if you're not really wanting to do bow pose because it's ending up being a little bit too intense and painful, then do eagle arms on the other side. So arms come out wide, cross the left arm underneath the right, and then either hands come to the shoulders, maybe catch the fingers, or make your version of eagle arms here. Otherwise, if you're trying to do the full bow pose here, then this time come back to Sphinx, and it's the left arm that's lower. So bring the left arm across, and then bring the right arm across. And then from here, slowly allow just as much relaxation as you can stand until you have as much pressure in this pose as you can stand. And give yourself permission to not have to stay for the whole time here. So you're watching, you're feeling your physical sensations, and you're just staying for as long as it's not injurious, not painful. It can be uncomfortable. A lot of times it's uncomfortable because we just haven't paid attention to that pressure before. So we'll stay here and see if there's other sensations in our inner landscape that we can notice to keep us in the present moment. One of the subtle objects that one can see in the night sky are comets. Comets can sometimes be pretty subtle, pretty dim. Sometimes they can be very bright and dramatic. So it's interesting to know what are comets? Where do they come from? So comets are a part of our solar system. So our solar system consists of the sun, the major planets that go around the sun, some asteroids, and the comets here. Our solar system is basically the solar neighborhood of our sun. So our sun dictates what goes on in our solar system. Comets are leftovers from the formation of our solar system. So when our solar system formed, it formed out of this gigantic cloud of gas and dust. And after a while, eventually the sun formed, planets formed, asteroids formed. But there were these little leftovers of ice and dust and dirt that kind of settled in different regions of the solar system. Some of them settled into a disk outside of the orbit of Neptune, so the last large gas giant. And that's known as a Kuiper belt, this disk of just this little leftover particles here. And there's some bigger things in there. There are things that are the size of Pluto in the Kuiper belt. But more or less, it's just little chunks of leftover ice. And every once in a while, one of those little chunks gets nudged by a planet like Neptune or Jupiter. And they can start falling in towards the sun. And since they're made up of ice, the closer they get, the ices begin to sublimate. And that forms a large cloud of gas around the solid part of the comet here. Just one more breath here on this side. When you're ready to come out, take your time here. Maybe you have to roll back and forth. Maybe you can just bring your torso up. And then when your torso gets up, come to a seated position. You can sit like me if that's possible. If this is not possible, find a different seat. Do some shoulder rolling again. So notice the reverberation and release of pressure here. And you can again roll your shoulders together one way and then roll them in the other direction. You can change directions a few times. So a few more breaths here in this counter pose rolling. So the next yin posture is saddle pose. Watch the demo for saddle, and if it's not for you, the alternative will be Sphinx pose. So the beginning of saddle is to actually start seated just like I was, sitting back on the heels or in between the heels. Now, if either one of those is accessible for you, then probably Sphinx is a good alternative here. But if you can sit this way, or maybe even with a prop like a couple of books, or I've got a yoga block here that I can sit on, then maybe you can try saddle. The next step to saddle is to lower your torso back, maybe on your arms. You're going slowly until you have feeling enough pressure as you can stand. So maybe you just stay on your shoulders here, or maybe you make it all the way back down onto the ground. Knees can float as long as they're not in pain, or if you're wanting some support, then this is where some height behind you might be handy here. By the way, your heels can be under your legs and your knees can be out wide, so there's many different variations of saddle pose. So maybe you can come back down onto some height here. If none of that is working, if it's generating too much strain, then come into Sphinx. And for Sphinx, you make your way onto your belly. Just like we did for bow tie, bring your elbows underneath your shoulders, shoulder width apart, and then relax your torso here. This is Sphinx, so head can be up, head can hang, head can be on a prop like a pile of books or a pillow here. And then just stay here. Otherwise, we'll stay in saddle for a couple more minutes here. So comets are essentially solid leftovers from the formation of the solar system. And some of them come from the Kuiper Belt, which is a disk out beyond past the last giant planet. So very far away past the orbit of Neptune. But some comets come from even farther away. So there's this sphere of leftover material that's even farther out than the Kuiper Belt, known as the Oort cloud. In fact, it's so far and vast that it's about a light year in diameter, and it gets close to our neighboring stars. And it turns out that a close passing neighboring star might actually perturb one of these leftover chunks of ice and rock in towards the solar system. So comets are classified in basically two groups: short period comets and long period comets. So if a comet enters the inner solar system and doesn't get evaporated or swallowed by the sun, if it's from the Kuiper Belt, it usually comes back regularly with a fairly reasonable period. So a short period comet is any comet that has a regular orbital period of less than 200 years. If a comet comes from the Oort cloud, it's usually coming so far away, its orbit is so close to parabolic, its orbital period is much longer than 200 years. So these are known as long period comets, and they can come from any direction since they're coming from this huge spherical supply of clouds, whereas comets from the Kuiper Belt are in the same plane as the solar system. So those comets are usually identified by their short period and by the fact that their orbit is in the same plane, rough plane, as the orbits of the planets around the sun here. So just one or two more breaths here in saddle pose or Sphinx. And then if you're in Sphinx, you'll lower yourself down. If you're in saddle pose, then you decide how you're going to get out of saddle pose. Take your time here. And grunt and groan and slowly make your way up here. If you were using props, maybe clear your mat of props. And a little bit of counter pose is maybe good here. So your legs were deeply flexed in that posture. Maybe extend the legs out a bit. I like downward facing dog myself. So you can come up into a downward facing dog to lengthen out and extend your legs. So spine is neutral. So if legs need to be bent a little bit, they can here. You're really rooting through your hands and your feet in this yang posture here. So just a breath or two. You can take your dog for a walk if you need to. And then bring yourself down onto hands and knees. So the next yin posture is called melting heart pose. This is the yin name to what's more commonly known as puppy dog pose here. And there'll be some alternatives here. So for this posture, you'll come to hands and knees. And then the classic expression of this posture is you just walk your arms forward. Lower your torso and let your heart melt to the floor until you're feeling pressure in the shoulders, in the upper back. So this is a shoulder opener. This is a thoracic spine opener. This is the intent of this posture. So if you're feeling it there, then you kind of get the idea of melting heart pose here. Sometimes the head and the neck get kind of kinked here. So you can put props, you can use books if you don't have yoga blocks. I'm going to just grab my yoga blocks here, place them underneath my elbows. Now I have created a space for my head and my neck here. And then you can just kind of just stay here for as long as your shoulders, your upper torso can manage this pose here. And then watch your breath, notice your sensations here. Maybe you don't like the blocks, maybe they makes this more intense for the shoulders. So hands are rooted, but the forearms ultimately become softened here. And then you just stay Belly is soft. Belly is sagging here. Torso, sternum is melting towards the floor here. And then you notice where the traction is here. So about another 1.5 minutes here or so. If this is enough for you, the counter pose for this will be wide-legged child's pose. So when the comets get into the inner solar system, they're usually made up of this block, this solid core of mainly ice, a little bit of dust and rock and organic material, which is on the order of anywhere from about 1 kilometer to about 10 kilometers wide. So for an object in space, it's not very wide, and it's not something that we'd ever be able to see very easily through a telescope or detect. But as it gets close to the sun, it begins to heat up. And as it does so, it starts to sublimate and evaporate and create a huge cloud of dust and gas around it. So the little rocky part is known as the nucleus. And the huge cloud of gas and dust around the nucleus, which reflects sunlight and we can see easily if the comet is close to us. That's called the coma. And the coma can be several 100,000 miles across. So it can be the size of Jupiter here. So just a couple more breaths here in melting heart. And then slowly plant your hands, bring your hands, press yourself up back into table pose. And then the counter pose for this is wide-legged child's pose. So maybe bring your knees mat width apart. Maybe your big toes touch, maybe not. Sink your hips back towards your heels, lower your torso. Arms can be extended forward, but what I would recommend is try extending your arms back here. And let your shoulders droop forward. It should help to relieve some of the pressure that was being created during melting heart pose here. So 1 or 2 more breaths here. And then release your hands, bring yourself up. We'll get ready for the next yin posture. The next yin posture is yoga squat. Now if you know if squatting doesn't really work for you, you can actually substitute wide-legged child's pose for this next posture. So if you're already in it and you're comfortable and you're good to go, you stay right there. Otherwise, we'll set up for a squat here. And so you'll basically find how you need to angle your feet, maybe bring them pretty wide, maybe mat distance, and then bend your knees and just bring yourself into a squat. Now this is a pretty young posture for me. I have to engage muscles to maintain this, and I'm wanting this to be more of a yin pose here. So what I would like to do is have something to actually sit on here. So again, you can take a pile of books. I'm again going to use one of these yoga blocks, and I'm going to sit on the yoga block so that my muscles don't have to be engaged. Now my hips and my lower body can soften, and I can sit here. I'm still feeling a lot running through my hips and running through my legs because that's the emphasis of the posture. But now my muscles can kind of relax because I've got the support of the prop. You might find that you don't need any support. You're quite comfortable without any support in this posture here. So we'll stay here for a few more minutes here. And if you decide that this is getting uncomfortable, then maybe get a prop if you're not using any props. I never know what to do with my hands in this posture, so I do a little bit of wrist work here. So I can point my hands down, put some pressure on my wrists here. I type a lot at the computer, or I can bring your hands to prayer, and then that's good for the wrists in the opposite direction. And then you just hang out for a while here. So depending on a few things, we may or may not see a comet, a new one or even an old one, as it passes through the inner solar system. First of all, it has to pass close to Earth. And second of all, it has to be ejecting a lot of this material, a lot of this ice and dust and gas. Particularly, the comet is made up of water ice. It's made up of carbon dioxide, so dry ice. It's made up of ammonia, methane, carbon monoxide, and the dirt part, the rocky part, often contains a lot of interesting organic molecules. Sugar, amino acids have been detected, so all kinds of hydrocarbons. In fact, it's a lot of the stuff that you need for life that are found in comets. As the comets get closer to the sun, it begins to jettison more and more material, and a tail forms. So this is what we see when they're close enough and bright enough to actually see. We see the coma, the bright coma. We see a tail forming. Sometimes it's just a white tail of reflected dust and neutral gas. Sometimes the comets have two tails. Sometimes you can see a faint bluish or greenish tail. That's an ion tail of ion gas, primarily carbon monoxide, which glows blue. And so that's what we see the closer the comet gets, although all comets are a little bit different because their constituent parts, depending on where they're from, are different. And they behave differently. So some comets don't get very close to the Earth, so we never see them. Astronomers detect them. We detect about 10 to 20 comets every year, but only one or two every decade get bright enough that we can see it easily with the naked eye. Some comets get too close to the sun. They just plunge right into the sun and disappear forever. Other comets never actually evaporate very much. They don't actually create a lot of gas around their nucleus. And because of that, there's nothing to reflect sunlight. And so they spend their whole lives not very bright. Others, sometimes they decide to put on a show. And those can be very brilliant. Probably the most famous comet is not famous because it is bright, sometimes it is, but because they come back every year. They're the periodic comets. And Halley's Comet is the most famous of these. It's just famous because Edmund Halley actually discovered that this particular comet that kept returning throughout antiquity and history was not a different comet every time. It was the same one, and it kept coming by every 75 years. And he was the first one to predict that it would come back again. And so he lived in the 1600s. He predicted that it would come back in 1758, and indeed it did. And this was actually after he died, but people remembered that he predicted that it would come back. And so we've celebrated Halley coming back ever since. It came back in 1910, it returned to us in 1986, and it'll visit us again in 2061 here. So just one more breath here. And if you're not already out of Malasana, you can kind of lean forward here slightly. And then maybe slowly lift your hips up, or maybe come down onto hands and knees. And slowly make your way onto your back. Extend your legs out long. Just to kind of reverberate from that final hip opener here. And before we move into our final posture, Shavasana, we'll do just a little bit of a reclining twist here. So with legs out long, bend your left knee in towards your torso. Give your left knee a nice hug. And then take your right hand, put it on the left knee, and then sweep the left knee over to the right, so you're stacking your left hip on top of your right. Left shoulder melts back towards the floor. And maybe this left knee makes it to the ground, maybe it doesn't. So this left arm is a T or a cactus arm position here. Head can be neutral, or head can look over that left arm. And just stay here for one more breath. Inhale, bring that left knee back up. Extend it out. Bend the right knee. Draw the right knee into the chest. Give it a nice hug. And then take the left hand on the right knee. Sweep the right knee out to the right, so you're stacking your hips into making a spinal twist here. Right shoulder trying to melt back towards the ground here. And then they just stay here for maybe another breath. And then on your next inhale, bring the knee back up. For a moment, maybe bend both knees, draw them into your torso, give them a nice hug. And then if there's any other kind of little movements or motions or adjustments you would like to make, then do those now. And then make your way into your version of resting pose here. It can be just lying on the floor. It can be lying on the floor, but with a few props here. So maybe some padding underneath the knees to keep the knees soft is nice. Or maybe a pillow underneath the head. Maybe legs up the wall is a nice idea. Or maybe you feel that just sitting quietly for a few moments is a good resting posture. So take some time to get settled. And then when you do get settled, begin to soften. Notice the points of contact that your body makes with the ground. If you're lying on the ground, then notice the contact that your head makes with the ground, your shoulders, your hips, your feet. If you're sitting, then maybe just your legs and your feet. Begin the process of noticing and softening. You can start with your head. So release and relax your jaw, your tongue, your chin, your nose, your cheeks, insides of your cheeks, the outsides of your cheeks, so the whole region of your mouth is soft. Soften the skin around each ear. Release the pressure, the tension around your eye sockets. Release that space in between your eyes, your third eye, and soften your forehead, soften your temples, and soften the very crown of your head. Release your thoughts, relax your brain. Thoughts can just drift softly in and softly out. Postpone being a human doing. Give yourself permission to be a human being. You have nowhere to go. You have nothing to do for the next few moments. Soften down through the rest of your torso. Relax your neck and your shoulders. Soften each arm. Relax your right arm, right palm, right fingers. Left arm, left palm, and left fingers. Pause and notice the tips of all of your fingers on both hands. See if you can notice a light tingling sensation in the tips of your fingers. That interplay between your nervous system and your capillaries. Yoga, it's called noticing your life force, noticing prana. Soften down through the rest of your torso. Relax your rib cage. Release your abdomen. Continue to soften and release down through your hips, thighs, knees, shins and calves, ankles, heels, soles and tops of your feet, and then all of your toes, both feet. And then see if you can notice that light sense of energy, that light tingling. Clear down there in the tips of your toes. Each toe, left foot and right foot. Release, relax, and surrender your body-mind 100%. And then visualize yourself as a comet. Slowly moving in towards the sun. You're floating effortlessly through space. And as you face and get closer to the sun, you feel the soft warmth of the sunlight. And that soft warmth begins to sublimate these ices and these gases. It begins to warm you up and soften you up And as you do so, as you gently float in space, notice and feel yourself just gently sublimating away. At some point, begin to deepen your breath. Bring your mind back into the room. And start making little motions with fingers and with toes. Expand that motion into wrists and into ankles. You can start moving legs and arms around. If you're lying on the floor, when you feel ready, go ahead and bend your knees gently. Roll over onto one side. When you get there, kind of soften and release and give yourself a big thank you for your practice. But also a big thank you to you, your unique manifestation in the universe. The universe is ecstatically joyful that you are here. And then when you feel ready, bring yourself up to a comfortable seat. Arrive here. Find some roots. Grow your spine tall. Notice your breath. And then bring your hands together in front of heart center. I'll end practice with one chanting of Om. You can join me or just listen to my voice. The inner light in me honors the inner light in you. Namaste.